Thank you for joining us today for this important discussion. I'm Naomi Kohler, Director of the Simon Skjodt Center for the Prevention of Genocide at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. 10 years ago, South Sudan gained independence from Northern Sudan after decades of brutal conflict in which 2.5 million people were killed. July 9th, 2011 was a moment of celebration, but just 2 years later, the country plunged into a civil war in which government forces, opposition groups, and armed militias killed over 500,000 civilians, displaced 4 million people, and committed widespread acts of sexual violence. Perpetrators frequently target civilians due to their ethnic identity or perceived political affiliation. Unfortunately, only a handful of perpetrators have been held accountable to date. The museum is working to advance much-needed justice in South Sudan by working with local and international partners to develop strategies and projects that put victims and survivors at the center of the demand for justice. The current risks of mass atrocities being perpetrated against civilians in South Sudan remains high. Experts, including the museum's Early Warning Project, are concerned that the conflict at the local level, which parties to the conflict are actively stoking, and a struggling peace process on the brink of collapse may lead to further mass atrocities. This risk increases if past crimes remain unaddressed. To prevent future mass atrocities, we continue to work with the Biden administration to center its policy on South Sudan on prevention and justice. We continue to have hope for a more peaceful, just, and prosperous future for South Sudan. But this can only be accomplished if perpetrators are held to account, if victims receive some form of justice, and if future atrocities are prevented. I'm pleased to be speaking with Adang Leek, the Executive Director of the South Sudan Women's Empowerment Network, and Jana Ramsey, Senior Advisor at the Office of Global Criminal Justice in the US government. We will hear first some remarks from Gordon Lamb, Executive Director of the South Sudan Dialogue and Research Initiative.
Hello, this is Gordon Lamb, the Executive Director of Dialogue and Research Institute, an organization that works with victims and survivors of conflicts. And DRI is a member of Transitional Justice Working Group that advocate for protection of victim human rights and access to justice and accountability. I'm here to reflect on the 10 years anniversary of independence of South Sudan, which is around the corner. The independence of South Sudan came as a result of long war and a long suffering. The people of South Sudan, since 1955, half a decade conflict. Many people describe this as a century-old conflict. During those days, people of South Sudan endured suffering, poverty, and fear, torture, and destruction. After the independence in July 11, the 9/11s, when millions of people turn up and celebrate the day of independence, what it means? It means peace has come. Injustice has gone. Justice and accountability has been installed. Freedom and equality has been assured. Poverty has gone. John Grant one time said that we are fighting for independence because South Sudan would become a first-class citizen. A first-class citizen would mean that South Sudan united, South Sudan is democratic, South Sudan is productive, South Sudan would be able to feed itself. And South Sudan would be a peaceful country, a peaceful society, where hope and accountability would be realized by all the citizens of South Sudan. This is the opposite. After 2011, nearly 2 years, South Sudan relapsed to brutality. South Sudan is a zone of fear, is Many people describe this as a killing society, as a zone of fear, a zone of war. Many people describe it as a killing field. South Sudan has turned to itself. The guns that were used for liberating the country were turned against the citizens, were turned against the people whom were the people who liberate the country. The people who fought for independence turned against each other. That means impunity, torture, and poverty, corruption has taken over. And then the fear has taken over, mistrust, and a lack of accountability has taken over. This must be tackled. South Sudan must return to the dream of independence. South Sudan must return to the dream of peace, a dream of prosperity, a dream of equality, a dream of peace, and being a bread basket for the region. South Sudanese people must unite and must come together. Right now, after the independence, South Sudan has been described as a corrupt and has a killing field. The leaders of South Sudan are far away from their own citizens. The region is far away from fixing South Sudan. South Sudanese themselves need to rethink what is the independence for. Why did we lose 2.5 million people? For what? We must come up to unite and have justice and accountability and bring peace to South Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon, for those powerful remarks. I'm now joined by Jana Ramsey, a senior advisor in the State Department's Office of Global Criminal Justice, who's been working for nearly a decade on South Sudan. Jana, the US government was heavily involved in helping South Sudan to become its own country. Senior US government officials, including then US Ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Rice, traveled to the country in support of the move for independence. Over the past 10 years, what has the United States government done to further its mission to support the world's youngest country by pursuing justice for past mass atrocities and preventing their recurrence?
Thank you, Naomi. So prior to independence, the South Sudanese people lived through decades of violence without seeing any justice or accountability for the atrocities they survived. When the conflict started in the newly independent South Sudan in December 2013, it was clear how important it was that those responsible for such atrocities are held accountable to break the cycles of violence fueled by impunity. So the US approached this problem in a number of ways. First, by supporting the robust human rights documentation and reporting, by working to strengthen the mandate of the United Nations mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, human rights reporting, funding independent human rights documentation efforts, and pressing for the establishment of the Commission on Human Rights for South Sudan through the UN Human Rights Council. Second, even before the 2015 peace agreement was signed, Secretary Kerry announced the commitment of $5 million to support a credible, impartial justice mechanism to try atrocities in South Sudan and to build the capacity of South Sudanese civil society to document human rights violations. And finally, in each successive administration, the US has been a committed supporter of justice in South Sudan. In Juba, in Addis, in New York, in Geneva, and elsewhere, the US has consistently affirmed the importance of accountability as one of our top policy priorities.
Thanks for that, Jana. Just as a follow-up, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you have come across in trying to advance this work and support the various lines of effort that you just mentioned?
It's always very difficult to work for justice and accountability when the country is currently experiencing mass atrocities. So you're trying to do two things at once, both highlight what's happening and try and prevent that immediate violence from occurring. So working to make sure that the UN has what it needs, the mandate and all of the resources to protect civilians. At the same time, and trying to do the political work of engaging and negotiating so that parties will stop fighting, that to work on ceasefires, and at the same time trying to think through, well, what do we do when this is over? How do we plan for the long term? What is the groundwork we need to lay so that at some point we will be able to address these violations through credible transitional justice mechanisms? So I think, trying to balance both those immediate needs in the middle of a crisis and start building laying the groundwork for what happens in the future. I mean, it's hard to do both of those at the same time. And obviously, working for justice and making demands for justice, before there's been a transition, while parties are still, at the negotiating table, that's always very difficult.
And the fact is, you mentioned that there are currently ongoing mass atrocity crimes and future risks of crimes as well. With the passage of the Elie Wiesel Act and the US government's focus on atrocity prevention, what should the American public expect that the government will do to try to help prevent atrocities in South Sudan moving forward?
So atrocity prevention is in the US national interest. On International Holocaust Remembrance Day this year, President Biden affirmed that preventing future genocides is both our moral duty and a matter of national and global importance. So the Elie Wiesel Genocide and Atrocities Prevention Act codifies the US commitment to prevent, mitigate, and respond to atrocities using a whole of government approach. So that includes targeted US diplomatic and programming activities, training of domestic and overseas personnel, and engagement of civil society organizations and of our external partners. The State Department is deeply concerned with the growth in subnational violence, often of an ethnic nature with political linkages, and is working to engage those responsible to promote dialogue between and among communities and reduce the drivers of conflict. The State Department will continue to support human rights defenders and independent journalists, so they have the tools to identify, report on, and respond to human rights abuses. Working through civil society and independent radio outlets, the State Department ensures that citizens are engaged and informed of their rights and can access accurate information and resources.
You've been working both on the Balkans and on South Sudan, and I was wondering if there are any lessons that you would pull out from your experience in the Balkans or elsewhere that you think are particularly relevant, especially for South Sudanese civil society, and as people think about the next 10 years, what we should keep in mind in the pursuit of justice and accountability.
I think one of the things that's been most clear to me is that justice is more than a few trials for a few individuals. That what justice means in the aftermath of the kinds of atrocities we've seen in the Balkans and South Sudan means that there have to be efforts to address the root causes of conflict, to address the truth, and to find ways to repair victims. And so all of the different mechanisms of transitional justice, truth commissions, memorialization, institutional reform, all of that is needed for real justice to happen. And it's not, and even when trials, once we have trials and they're done, I think real justice is an ongoing struggle. It means continually, it means starting a new relationship with a government where you expect them, where the government is going to uphold your rights. And I think people have to be able to continually hold their government accountable and to continue to insist that the government holds up its end of the bargain. And so I think that's the thing to me that's most profound, is a few trials doesn't really get to, it's good, it addresses a few individuals and their criminal responsibility, but real justice has to be transformative, and it has to transform the relationship of the state and the society to make it into a rights-respecting country.
Can you talk a little bit about the importance of documentation in the pursuit of justice, and what are the levels at which that has to be undertaken or is being undertaken in the case of South Sudan?
I think documentation is critical for a number of reasons. One, it's important to do the documentation and reporting for things that are going on now, so the world has a clear understanding of the what's happening on the ground as things unfold. But we also invest in documentation because we know that trials could happen sometime in the future. And so the more that's done now to make sure that evidence is not lost, that we have, that memories don't fade, that people are able to share their experiences now, so that we can capture that for the future, and for the mechanisms that will come along, not just the trials, but truth commissions and other institutions that will help us to understand what the root causes of the crisis were, and what happened during the crisis. So the State Department has, worked to support documentation on a number of levels, whether, through the UNMISS Human Rights Division, which has been doing documentation and reporting throughout the conflict, through the South Sudan Commission of Inquiry from Geneva, which is also gathering evidence potentially to be used in trials in the future, and then to the local civil society groups that have been collecting evidence and going out to engage in documentation. And so all of these efforts are very important, and I think will help us or will help lay the foundation for efforts, for transitional justice efforts, when the time is right and the institutions are ready to begin working.
One of the big promises for or potentials for justice and accountability was the creation of a hybrid court. Mm-hmm. And there's been quite a lot of attention around that, both political attention and then economic investment. Mm-hmm. And it's proven to be a fraught endeavor. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, just from your perspective of having worked both with local civil society or aspiring very much to be able to see this come to light, and engaging with political figures, both within South Sudan, but also within the African Union. What do you see as being the potential for the future of such a court? What are some of the steps that need to be taken to actually see this actually come into fruition?
Yeah, it's definitely been a very challenging and fraught process. That said, there's obviously some more recent signs, of progress. I think it was very encouraging that the Minister of Justice in January of this year was given, authorization to start moving forward on these mechanisms. But I do think it's something that we have to keep pressing on, every day in Juba and Addis and elsewhere, to really keep moving forward step by step. So I think it's I don't think anything will happen overnight. We just keep, but we're not dropping the, it's not an issue that we're going to ever stop pushing on. It's clearly in the peace agreement. It's an obligation for the AU and for the government of South Sudan to fulfill. And so we're going to keep insisting, that they make it happen. I think one of the things that I've seen from my office is that justice can be very slow. But last week, the final appeals verdict against Ratko Mladic was announced. And that happened after Mladic was in hiding for years, protected, was largely protected, but eventually he was turned over, tried, and held accountable. And so I think that even when it seems very difficult, I think that persistence and continued engagement usually in the end results in accountability. And so I think we just keep moving forward and keep engaging.
I think, as you said, it's also kind of an example of where you need to have a sustained effort on so many fronts. The victims at the end of the day continue to work and mobilize to see some form of justice and accountability served at the end. We've seen just in the last few months cases involving perpetrators who are in their 90s from the Holocaust moving forward. And that for the remaining Holocaust survivors that are kind of asked for their thoughts on it, it remains very meaningful to know that despite the fact that we are, close to 80 years to the start of actually the Holocaust right now, that we have still that commitment to the pursuit of justice, very much at the fore of efforts there. But also, in the case that you're referring to, you have a strong commitment from the international community to continue to invest in pursuing individuals that committed crimes in the former Yugoslavia. And hopefully that's an enduring commitment that the people of South Sudan will also see from the not just regional actors, but also international community, including the US government. You've spent close to a decade working in South Sudan with South Sudanese partners. I was wondering if you could talk about what some of the most inspiring moments of that work has been over the past decade.
Well, having just talked about the challenges of ensuring meaningful justice and accountability in South Sudan, and the ongoing violence that's obviously very deeply disturbing, I think what has inspired me and continues to inspire me are the members of the South Sudanese civil society that I've met over the years. I mean, these human rights defenders and activists are working for a peaceful, just South Sudan. They're smart, they're brave, they're tenacious. Many of them risk their own safety to stand up for human rights. Every time I've been able to travel to Juba or Addis to attend one of the workshops or to meet with individuals working on accountability, I come away energized, and I come away with my resolve deepened. And South Sudanese civil society has all of my respect and admiration, and I think I think that's sort of the driving force for why I would continue to work on South Sudan. It's really it's a pleasure and a privilege to get to work on this issue with so many talented and dedicated people.
Thank you for that, Jenna. It's been wonderful to be able to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. I'm honored now to be able to introduce Adeng Leek. Adeng, it's such a pleasure to be here with you. Adeng Leek is the Executive Director of the South Sudan Women's Empowerment Network. Adeng, I was hoping that we could start with you just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about the organization that you work with and what motivates your work.
Okay, thank you so much, Naomi. Thank you so much for bringing me up here and for hosting me. Okay, my name is Adeng Leek. I'm a South Sudanese, and I work for South Sudan Women Empowerment Network as an executive director. SWEN is a non-profit, non-partisan, and non-governmental organization. It was founded in 2005. Our focus is on the empowerment of women through programs that encourage women participation in decision-making, gender mainstreaming, and human rights advocacy. Our vision is we want to see South Sudanese society free of gender bias, because with the previous conflict and also conflict of 2013 and 2016 that has happened, a lot of women has struggled and also faced a lot of issues, inequality, gender-based violence, and also any type of gender-based violence, including the sexual gender-based violence that has affected many women in South Sudan. So that's why the organization was founded, and also we want women to be empowered and self-reliant and enjoying fundamental rights.
Adeng, can you talk a little bit more about women's experiences during the conflict?
A lot of women had faced a lot of violence, especially the gender-based violence, and also the sexual gender-based violence, which is rape during the conflict, which has resulted in a lot of issues related to self-confidence and also trauma, and also many women has ended up killing themselves or even dying because of an untreated situation or the level of trauma that the person has gone through.
So incredibly painful and really remarkable, the work that you're doing. We know from the experience of the Holocaust just how incredibly difficult it is to address the trauma that so many victims experience, and also how important advancing justice is to helping to at least ensure that there is some accountability, but also in trying to bring, you can never have closure, but at least some acknowledgement of the crimes, which is part of what I think many victims are seeking to have, and in part helps to help people start the journey of dealing with the trauma that they've experienced. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the current situation in South Sudan and some of the concerning reports that experts and observers are are putting forward, including our museum's early warning project, there's serious concerns about the possible risk for future mass atrocities, including ethnically targeted violence. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what are some of the signs that you see for possible future violence.
The conflict that flared up in December 2013 and then again in July 2016 was really ugly and gruesome. The manner of indiscriminate killings, mainly in Juba, Malakal, Bor, and Bentiu, left a deep gash in the hearts of many, unless a realistic and effective process of instituting justice, accountability, and healing is launched and sustained to its desirable conclusion. I see that the worst is yet to come, as the supposed anger and feeling of hate might rupture yet again like a second wave of an epidemic, which can be more fatal than the first. The second factor, I've already mentioned the first factor. The second factor, economy at the verge of collapse. Ever since security broke down in the country, the economy has suffered tremendously to the extent that the government can hardly afford to buy medicines. As I have already mentioned about the women access to health facilities. The government can hardly afford to buy medicines and other medical supplies and pay its civil servants for several months. I have families who have not been able to receive some of their salaries. This is likely to cause an unrest and desperation already. Therefore, cases and banditry and robbery along some roads linking Juba to other towns, which can be defined as an extreme coping strategy for the economy, the collapse of the economy. So with the rampant arms in many hands as well, this situation could be triggered by the slightest of the sparks and gravitate into major and unstoppable fight. All this because of economy. Let's see how the economy can affect the country like strongly, because we might think that economy is something that is not something that we should address, but this is something we should address because it can affect the whole country. So the third factor is rampant and uncontrolled exploitation of our natural resources, and massive land grabs by foreign interests. By that, as I have to say, I have read several reports on exploration of our scarce natural resources and forests by foreign companies, because South Sudan is amazingly beautiful, and we have a lot of resources that we would have made good use of it if we really focus on what we want to do in the country in terms of development. So all these things are, explored and exploited by foreign companies in collaboration with some local individuals. I cannot deny the part of that local individuals are part of it in exchange for quick riches. And this is also related to the economy that the situation is happening. So I'm therefore afraid that such level of growing discomfort might reach a boiling point and might one day erupt. The last one, let me be brief, is ethnic intolerance. Any visitor to South Sudan who stays over a week cannot fail to see our ethnic divisions and intolerance. We have not invested sufficiently in peace building and institutionalization, despite the existence of institutional setups. Let me mention also, there's no fund set aside for planning and implementing robust programs for ensuring our national unity.
Thank you so much for that, Adeng, for just so clearly kind of articulating a number of the worrying areas that exist right now and may contribute to future conflict and mass atrocities. I think your last point just around the fact that you need to really invest in order to build the national unity and to foster, especially in the aftermath of the commission of mass atrocities in previous points of conflict, is so critically important to ensuring that the country can move forward in a secure and stable manner. And I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about the need for peace, nation building, and justice in South Sudan as we mark the 10-year anniversary of South Sudan's independence. What do you think is important in order to prevent future violence and mass atrocities and bring the country together? We know from the history of the Holocaust that when warning signs are present, it is really imperative that local domestic, regional, international actors take steps to try to mitigate those risks, and that the failure to do so can have really horrific consequences. In this particular case, you outlined a couple of areas that you think are particularly concerning. What do you think is needed for the future of the country to avert that, as you said, worst outcome?
Specifically, I can say invoking justice. Justice is really important because justice instills confidence in the instructions of justice and serves to calm down a feeling of bitterness that I have already spoke about. And it heals feelings of hurt. Even you can see on my face, because I really want justice to happen because there is a lot of feeling of hurt. Let me not say bitterness because God forbid, I don't want bitterness on my heart. I need to live a peaceful life and also to relax and because of my health. So feelings of hurt on the part of the one who is afflicted, definitely, betrayed or persecuted. It root out impunity. For it to be effective, justice must be carried out promptly and without delay. Because if we delay, a lot of atrocities is going to happen sooner rather than later. As the saying goes, justice delayed is justice denied.
It's an incredibly holistic approach to justice as well. And I think it's so important to underscore, as you have, that it really means engaging at the local level within communities and trying to help to shore up what the rule of law should mean, and ensure that there is justice that's meted out in a many different ways. In terms of just the South Sudan and how it's understood by the rest of the world, Adeng, often when we talk about conflict prevention, mass atrocity prevention, we talk about potential perpetrators, and often youth are one of the groups that we talk about as being potential perpetrators. I want to flip the question a little bit and talk a little bit about what is the potential for youth. What opportunities does supporting investing in youth bring to the future of South Sudan?
Youth can change their mind but through some activities that will, some might not even be interested to do that, further their education or to do their studies, but some might be interested to do their vocational trainings to get money because the situation of the country now, the economic situation of the country is really at stake. Keep them busy, let them learn through the process, understand why they exist in this world. I am able to understand that because I met different people. My mom is educated, my sister is educated, my grandmother is educated. And through that, I was able to change my perception of how I can see South Sudan through the crisis. And let me say in 10 years, before 10 years, I will not say that, okay, I cannot go for therapy to go and talk to a stranger about my issues. But now I look forward to go for therapy. I look forward to do a yoga, meditate, and relax, go to the church, all these things that can facilitate healing to myself. So you will find that if we don't do this healing of the wounds that they have, leave alone the physical wound, the internal wound, we have a long way to go.
The focus on how to inspire the future generation and invest in the youth to ensure that there isn't the repeat of what has happened in the past is such a critical area for focus and attention. And as you have said so powerfully, is where really the future of the country lies. If we can mobilize the youth, educate the youth, you will hopefully be able to put in place a lot of the things that you've talked about over the past hour in regards to addressing rule of law gaps, advancing justice, helping to address trauma. But it's also critical, as you've said just now, to find those strategies today to try to address the immense trauma that a lot of people face. A lot of young people who've grown up seeing things that really are hard for most of the viewers to fathom, given what they've had to endure with conflict and atrocities that have taken place. Now, at this moment of reflection, 10 years on, what do you want the world to know about South Sudan?
I would like the world to know that South Sudan is beautiful. You come to South Sudan, you can see our models all over the world. We are beautiful ladies. We have beautiful NBA players. And South Sudan, like a lot of people are making use of us. This is resources, amazing mind. We can do things beyond what you guys think. Conflict? No, we are not troublesome people. So I would like to say, I would like the world to know that ongoing bloody conflict in my country is not of reflection that we are troublesome people or that aggressiveness runs in our blood vessels. In brief, I would like the world to know that, like many nations that had suffered brutal civil wars and even genocides, I'm optimistic that we will learn and come to appreciate that war is work of the devil. We will come to the realization that ethnic intolerance is self-destructive. Because if I started being discriminating other people, it will destroy me myself, and it will even distract me from doing other things.
Thank you so much, Adeng, for joining us today. It's been a real honor to have you with us, and we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity as well.
Thank you to our speakers, Gordon Lamb, Jana Ramsey, and Adeng Leek, for joining us today. Our speakers shared today the hopes of peace, justice, equality, and freedom of independence that have not been fulfilled. As Gordon put so powerfully, the guns that were used for liberating the country were turned against the citizens who fought for independence. There are a number of current risks to civilians in South Sudan that must be addressed. We're seeing reports that government and opposition forces are arming and stoking conflict. Leaders who perpetrated atrocities against ethnic groups are now governing the very people they oppressed. Millions of citizens around the country are starving, sometimes as a result of deliberate acts by the government. Despite all these challenges, we are struck by the hope that Adeng and Gordon expressed for South Sudan's next years. And for these hopes to be realized, South Sudan desperately needs justice for past crimes. Thank you all for joining us today. Please email any questions or comments to the Simon Skjodt Center at genocideprevention@ushmm.org.